Today we're talking about some common mistakes that new keepers make when keeping tarantulas and how you can avoid them, so keep watching. Welcome to the Tarantula Collective. My name is Richard. I make videos about tarantulas, scorpions, and other exotic pets. If that's something that you're into, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Now, everyone starts at the beginning, and we all make plenty of mistakes. But there are some common mistakes that new keepers make that despite how many videos I make or other people make or how many websites or posts are out there, for some reason this bad information keeps hitting the top of the list even though it's been years since we've learned better. If you're guilty of making these mistakes, don't feel bad. I'm not judging you. In fact, the majority of these mistakes I've made myself. I just want to share my experience and what I've learned to help you become a better keeper. And the first common mistake is not using enough substrate. I know it sounds like a cliche at this point. You see it all over the internet. Needs more substrate, needs more substrate, give it more substrate. But the reality is, in most cases, that's true. Your tarantula enclosure needs to be filled at least halfway with substrate. And a lot of people new to keeping tarantulas only provide an inch or two. And that's just not enough. And there's two reasons for this. One is that most terrestrial tarantulas like to burrow. If you give them the proper amount of substrate in their enclosure, they will dig a deep burrow. It makes them feel safe and secure. It's part of their natural behavior, so don't rob them of that. The second reason is for safety. Almost every tarantula, for the first few weeks or months that you put it inside its new enclosure, is going to roam all around the place. They're going to climb up the walls. They're going to climb across the top of the enclosure. And it's very dangerous if a tarantula falls while they're hanging on the very top of the enclosure. So you want to provide as little distance between the top of the enclosure and the top of the substrate as possible. A good rule of thumb is for terrestrial species to fill that enclosure at least halfway up, sometimes even more. I try to have no more than 1.5 times the leg span of the tarantula in space between the top of the substrate and the top of the enclosure. The larger your tarantula is, the more important this is. The last thing you want is a heavy-bodied tarantula hanging from the top of the enclosure to fall a great distance, because they could end up rupturing their abdomen and dying. So give them a lot of substrate. Another common beginner mistake is using a heat lamp. And I'm telling you, lose the heat. I don't care if you live on the equator or in the Himalayan mountains, whether you're in the highlands of Scotland or on a research base in Antarctica. Tarantulas don't need a heat lamp. Not only do they not need a heat lamp, it can actually be deadly. The majority of tarantula species do fine at room temperature, anywhere between like 65 or 68 degrees to as much as 74, 75, even 78 degrees. If you're keeping your tarantula in a room where the majority of the time it is below 68 degrees, move them to a warmer room. If you can't move them to a warmer room, then get a space heater for that room. It's much better for the tarantula to be in a room where the ambient temperature is warmer than to have a direct heat source only warming up their enclosure. If you can't use a space heater to warm up the entire room, then consider keeping them in a closet or in a cabinet where you can warm up just that space. I have a whole video on how I keep my spiderlings and juvenile tarantulas warm during the winter. I will link that at the end of this video. But that method can be scaled up to large cabinets to keep adult specimens warm as well, without having to provide a direct heat source straight into the enclosure. The issue with heat lamps is, one, they will remove all humidity. They'll really dry out the enclosure, which can be dangerous for tarantulas. The second reason is because, I don't even know why, but tarantulas seem to be drawn to the heat. So if you have a heat lamp on top of the enclosure, more than likely the tarantula is going to crawl up and just hang out right underneath there. They're not like reptiles where they will move back and forth to regulate their body heat. So please lose the heat lamps. Another common issue is over misting your enclosures. The majority of my tarantulas, I never miss them. Just provide them with a shallow dish filled with water and they're going to be fine. The only exception is small spiderlings and some arboreal tarantulas. I will mist some water onto their webbing, since webbing is waterproof and those droplets will just hang there. The tarantula can come and take a drink. But for many years, there was some bad care advice regarding avicularia and carabina, where people suggested misting at least once a day, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. And all that really accomplished was creating a very humid, stagnant environment inside those enclosures. So a more moisture-loving tarantula, you could probably get away with misting it once or twice a week if needed. But this misting 2 to 3 times a day like it's some high humidity needing reptile is not just bad, it's dangerous. You don't want to kill your tarantula. So cut back on the misting or cut it out altogether unless it's definitely necessary. Another mistake or misconception is about lighting. Lights are not necessary. You look around, I've got lights on all of my enclosures, but they're not heat lamps or incandescent lamps. They're not even fluorescent. They're small LED puck lights that put off really no heat at all. And I don't keep them on all the time. I turn them on when I'm making a video like this, or when I'm feeding or watering my tarantulas, or sometimes when I'm just bringing someone down here to the basement to check them out. I'll turn on the lights so they can see everything a lot more clearly. But I don't leave the lights on 100% of the time. The sunlight that comes through the windows or the lights that you have on throughout your house during the day provide plenty of ambient light if you're worried about a day-night cycle. Lights are not necessary for enclosures, but they can make them look cool. And I prefer to use LED lights because they don't use a lot of energy, so they're much cheaper than other lights, and they don't put off a lot of heat, so they're not dangerous like other lights. Now, this issue doesn't pertain just to new keepers, but it seems most common among people new to the hobby, and that is putting a tarantula on your face. This is a bad idea for many reasons. One, tarantulas don't like to be held, so they're not going to be happy about you handling them. Two, depending on what type of tarantula you have, it can lead to some serious issues. Old world tarantulas have some potent venom, and if they're crawling around your face and get startled and bite, that can be very painful and cause some serious swelling on your face. Most New World tarantulas have urticating hair, which typically just cause some itching and burning, maybe leaves a little rash. But if those hairs were to get into your eyes, nose, or mouth, or worse, if you were to breathe them in and they got into your lungs, it could cause some serious medical issues. You don't want to have to go to a doctor to have them surgically remove urticating hairs from your eye because you thought it'd be cool to get a cool picture with a tarantula on your face for Instagram. Respect your tarantula, respect their safety, and respect your own safety, and don't put tarantulas on your face. It's not a good idea. Real quick, if you're enjoying this video or you're finding the content helpful, make sure you hit that like button and be sure you're subscribed while you're down there. This video is running a little long, so I'm gonna split it up into 2 parts. Part 2 will be out in just a few days, so be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. We're getting real close to 100,000 subscribers, and I'm hoping to hit that milestone by the end of the year, so every sub counts. If you wanna see more videos on mistakes keeping tarantulas, I will link those right here. And if you wanna see the video about keeping your tarantulas warm in the winter, I'll put that right there. As always, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for buying Tarantula Collective merchandise, and I will see you next Tuesday.